And so the whispers began. Some speculated it was a medical crisis, a sudden, unexpected illness that had required immediate action. Others believed it was an accident, something that caught them off guard, no time to prepare, no chance to control the story. But the scariest theory of all, this wasn't new, that the palace had been struggling for months, maybe years, to keep this hidden until it had finally slipped out of their control. Because the monarchy doesn't confirm tragic news unless they have no other choice. They remain silent in the face of scandals, betrayals, and separations. So the very fact that they had spoken out now indicated that the truth had already started to leak, whether through staff, insiders, or a quiet panic that could no longer be contained by press releases. And just as quickly, the response spread like wildfire on social media. Pray for Louis started trending faster than anyone could have predicted, but it wasn't just well wishes being shared. People began posting photos of themselves in terror, parents, grandparents, friends, revisiting every video of Louis, searching for signs. Was that look in his eyes silent despair? Was that smile forced? Everyone became an amateur detective, not because they wanted drama, but because they felt something deeply unsettling beneath the surface of the royal calm. Amid it all was Catherine, not the queen-to-be, not the regal figure, but simply a mother confronted with a situation that no title could shield her from. Because if the terrible news was indeed as it seemed, Catherine wasn't crying for the cameras. She was crying because her son was going through something no one could have predicted, and the palace knew the world would soon find out. The palace's well-crafted statement masked a web of secrecy, hiding the true story, a story that began in a lesser-known chapter of Louis's life, one that the monarchy had fought tooth and nail to keep buried. For years, Princess Catherine had worn her signature smile as armor, but beneath that glowing public persona, she was a mother fighting a silent storm. Few were aware of the quiet hospital visits. Even fewer could see the worry in her guarded gaze whenever she looked at Louis. A diagnosis kept under wraps until now hung over them like a shadow. Catherine, always intuitive and perceptive, had recognized the signs early. Delays in speech, inconsistencies in motor coordination, gentle nudges from the royal nannies to consider further evaluation. But Catherine, always vigilant, knew something others overlooked. And so began the quiet consultations, the trips to specialized clinics behind the royal walls. Neurological tests, developmental assessments, foreign specialists flown in under false pretenses. It was not just prudence, it was desperation masked in composure. And Catherine refused to let anyone else take charge. Despite the royal traditions that demanded assistants handle every detail, she insisted on being present every step of the way. Every test, every tear, she would bear it all herself. But as much as Catherine tried to keep it under wraps, those closest to her began to realize this was not a typical health issue. The discussions shifted from treatment to coping, from healing to acceptance. Even Queen Elizabeth was discreetly informed of the situation during her final months. Her response was simple but chilling: protect the child, but also the crown. That message, spoken with cold finality, placed Charles in an agonizing position. Should he prioritize tradition or transparency? The emotional strain grew within the confines of Kensington as the disagreement about how to handle Louis's health deepened. Catherine, driven by maternal instinct, wanted to be honest, even if it meant exposing their private struggles to the world. William, ever the pragmatist, urged caution, fearing that such transparency could unravel the monarchy itself. Behind closed doors, tempers flared, words were exchanged, accusations thrown. Each passing month added pressure to a fragile situation. Louis, blissfully unaware, continued to live his childhood under the ever-watchful eyes of the royal family. Meanwhile, Catherine, with her grace and poise, maintained the royal facade for the world, all while silently fearing what might happen if the truth were ever exposed. And so Catherine kept her son's secret, not just to protect his privacy, but because she believed he deserved a life unburdened by royal duties and expectations. Louis should be Louis, she thought, not defined by his diagnosis, not reduced to a symbol. But no secret, no matter how carefully guarded, remains hidden forever. The royal facade began to crumble in the face of public scrutiny, and the event that shattered the silence would be marked by a tragedy no one could have predicted. A breakdown, an emergency medical airlift. The truth about Louis was no longer a matter of if, but when. In the search for a little peace, the royal family had retreated to their rural sanctuary. It was meant to be a calm, quiet refuge with only the bare minimum of staff and no scheduled events, a place for them to rest, to be still. But in an instant, everything changed. Louis, who had been playing nearby, froze, then he stumbled, then he fell, and he remained still. Panic struck instantly. Catherine was the first to reach him. Her scream reportedly echoed across the estate. The emergency protocols kicked into gear. Within seconds, a medical helicopter was radioed in. Royal protection officers, prepared for any political threat, stood paralyzed, utterly unprepared for what they were witnessing. This wasn't a security breach. It was far worse, the breakdown of a young child they had been instructed to protect at all costs. William, visibly shaken, rushed to help Louis. The paramedics, who had been trained for every type of emergency, acted swiftly, but their quiet composure was telling. Their fear was palpable. As the helicopter lifted off, Catherine was left behind, her composure shattered. Witnesses reported that she fell to her knees, sobbing violently and whispering Louis's name. Meanwhile, the Monarchy's internal command structure went into high alert. Every hospital staff member who interacted with Louis was immediately bound by a set of emergency protocols, an extraordinary and rare procedure activated only when the future of the royal line is at risk. Reports began to trickle in. The situation was far more serious than anyone had expected. Encrypted messages began to surface, words like neurological, unresponsive, and unknown cause appearing in nearly every report. The royal family's carefully crafted narrative had collapsed, and now they were facing an unprecedented crisis. The truth about Louis's condition, an ailment that had been kept under wraps for so long, was no longer something that could be hidden. The monarchy, now in a state of crisis, was rocked by the leak of a confidential royal medical document. The file detailing Louis's condition was uploaded to a whistleblower forum late at night and quickly spread across encrypted social media platforms. The palace scrambled to contain the fallout, but the damage had already been done. The document revealed the shocking truth. Prince Louis was suffering from a rare and progressive neurological condition. The diagnosis, along with the prognosis, was devastating. It wasn't just a short-term illness. It was a condition that would impair his cognitive and motor functions, making it impossible for him to perform the royal duties expected of him in the future. But the leak didn't end there. The file made reference to a secret royal contingency plan, the Elizabeth Protocol, designed to handle situations where royal heirs faced chronic illnesses that could threaten the monarchy's succession. This was information that had been kept hidden for generations, and now it was exposed for the world to see. The palace's worst fears were realized as the truth spilled into the public domain. The monarchy was no longer in control. The royal family's carefully maintained image had been shattered, and the world was left to confront the reality of their vulnerability. The palace, cornered and exposed, was forced to make a final declaration. At exactly 6:53 a.m., a brief and somber statement confirmed the unthinkable. Prince Louis would no longer be performing public duties. The monarchy, for the first time in modern history, had publicly acknowledged the medical reality of a royal child's condition. The statement, brief and devoid of royal ornamentation, was a quiet yet powerful admission that the future of the monarchy was no longer shaped by tradition alone. It was a change, an irreversible one, that would forever alter the course of royal history. For once, the language used wasn't about the crown, the title, or the institution. It was about family, health, and recovery. Catherine and William were now seen not just as royals, but as parents, fighting to protect their son's future, whatever the cost. Catherine, driven by maternal instinct, wanted to be open, even if it meant exposing their private struggles to the world. William, ever the pragmatist, urged caution, fearing that such transparency could unravel the monarchy itself. Behind closed doors, tempers flared. Words were exchanged, accusations were thrown. The pressure was mounting on every side. The royal couple had been thrust into an impossible situation, one that they had never prepared for. The weight of a monarchy of duty clashed with the reality of a mother's love. Each passing month increased the strain as Louis continued to grow and live under the scrutiny of the world, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around him. Catherine, though, couldn't shield him from everything. Catherine, ever graceful and composed in the public eye, found herself balancing on the edge of something far more personal and devastating. The public saw the woman who smiled at charity even. T.S., who posed for pictures with her children, but behind the scenes, she was a mother battling to protect her son from a reality that could destroy him, not just physically but emotionally. She feared that if the truth were ever revealed, Louis would be reduced to a symbol of royal tragedy. He would no longer be able to live the life of a carefree child. He would be forever burdened with the expectations of a dynasty that could no longer afford to allow him to simply be a boy. So she kept the secret, kept it locked away inside her heart, all the while continuing to play her part as the dutiful princess, the ever-smiling future queen. She couldn't bear to let anyone see the cracks in her armor, to let anyone know the pain that she carried. But as every month passed, as the signs grew harder to ignore, the fear of the truth slipping out became more consuming. The family's privacy wasn't just being invaded, it was being torn apart by the weight of a monarchy, unable to cope with a reality it couldn't control. And then, inevitably, it all came to a head. The breaking point came unexpectedly, and the palace's attempt to keep the royal life under wraps fell apart in a matter of moments. The leaks, the questions, the desperate need for answers all culminated in a situation that could no longer be hidden. Behind the palace's walls, the entire system began to buckle under the strain. The public's curiosity had escalated to outrage, and the monarchy's response was no longer choice. The truth had slipped out, and now there was no going back. The carefully constructed world of royal appearances, of flawless poise and controlled emotions, had shattered like glass. The story of Louis's health, a truth that had been held under lock and key for so long, was now laid bare for all to see. William, who had always been the heir to the throne, was suddenly forced to choose between his duty to the crown and his duty to his son. The fierce protector in him, the father, rose to the surface, pushing against the cold tradition that had long dictated the royal family's actions. He was no longer willing to stay silent, not when his son's future was at stake. His every decision, every word, now carried the weight of not just royal duty, but the personal responsibility of a father willing to sacrifice everything for his family. The pressure from the public, the media, and the royal advisors reached its boiling point. The debate about whether to disclose the truth about Louis's condition divided the family further. The questions were no longer about what was best for the monarchy, they were about what was best for a little boy whose life had been irrevocably changed. Catherine, for her part, stood by her son, her heart breaking with the knowledge that the world would never be the same again. She was forced to come to terms with a painful truth. No amount of royal status or wealth could shield her child from the cruel realities of life. And as the world watched, she understood that her role as a mother was more important than any title she could hold. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, William made an unthinkable decision. He declared that the truth about Louis could no longer be concealed, that the family would no longer be subjected to the suffocating grip of royal protocol. He demanded that the palace stop pretending that everything was fine, that the monarchy could continue as if nothing had changed. The world was already aware of the cracks, now they would confront them head-on. In a stunning act of rebellion, William forced the palace to acknowledge what had been hidden for so long. The truth was out, and it was a truth that would forever alter the course of the royal family. This wasn't just about a health crisis, it was about a monarchy on the brink of a reckoning that would leave its mark on the very fabric of the institution. The declaration was made, and it was unlike any other. There would be no more royal appearances for Louis. He would no longer be thrust into the spotlight, his life no longer dictated by the whims of public duty. This was a family's decision, not a monarchy's, and for the first time in history, the family's needs were placed above the institution's demands. But it wasn't just a royal declaration, it was a deeply personal one. Catherine and William, now standing together as parents, no longer had to pretend. They no longer had to maintain the illusion of perfection that the world expected. They were simply a mother and father, doing everything they could to protect their son, to give him the life he deserved, away from the pressures of royalty. It was a painful choice, one that would forever change the public's perception of the monarchy. And yet, despite the pain, despite the tears and the heartbreak, it was the only choice that felt right. For the first time in years, Catherine allowed herself to shed the weight of royal expectations and simply be there for Louis, to love him, to hold him, and to end. Sure that he would have a future where he could grow without the shadow of his title looming over him. In the end, it was not the monarchy that would define Louis's future, but his family, who had been the ones to protect him from the very system that had once shaped their destiny. The monarchy had been forced to confront its own fragility, and in doing so, it had shattered the illusion that it was impervious to the pain and struggle that every family faces. The royal family had been tested, and in the most difficult of ways, they had emerged, changed but resolute. As the days passed, the royal family was thrust into a whirlwind of media attention and public speculation. The moment the world learned the truth about Prince Louis's condition, there was no turning back. The palace's attempt to retain control of the narrative crumbled beneath the weight of the information now circulating freely. Public opinion began to split, with some showing support for the family's painful choice, while others demanded answers. The royal family was no longer just an institution, they were a family in crisis, desperately trying to hold themselves together amidst a storm of emotions, public scrutiny, and personal heartache. Catherine and William, for the first time, found themselves outside the protective walls of the monarchy, forced to navigate their personal grief under the glaring light of public scrutiny. The mask of royalty that they had worn so carefully for years, the armor that shielded them from the world's harshest judgments, had cracked. They were no longer simply figures of duty and tradition. They were parents, struggling to protect their son from the realities of his condition and the unforgiving nature of royal life. And yet, in the midst of this turmoil, a powerful shift was beginning to take place. The monarchy's carefully curated image had always been one of perfection, of untouchable grace, but now it was being tested in a way it had never been before. The people who had once looked to the royal family for stability and assurance now found themselves questioning everything they had believed about the institution. The quiet, private world of royalty was no longer so quiet. The truth had come to light, and there was no going back. The leak of Louis's medical records, revealing the severity of his condition, had forced the monarchy into a corner. No longer could they hide behind the facade of controlled appearances. The truth was out, and now the family had to confront it, both publicly and privately. As the palace scrambled to contain the fallout from the leak, the impact was felt far beyond the royal walls. News outlets seized the opportunity to dissect every detail, every word, every piece of the information that had been exposed. The world was watching, and the royal family could no longer pretend that their carefully constructed world had not been shattered. The truth about Louis's health had ignited a global conversation, and the monarchy's power to dictate the narrative was slipping away. Despite this, Catherine and William remained resolute. For the first time, the world saw them as they truly were, parents who had been forced to make an agonizing decision to protect their child. The truth had laid bare the vulnerabilities they had kept hidden for so long, and in doing so, had forced the family to confront their own humanity. The decision to withdraw Louis from public duties marked a turning point for the monarchy. It was a symbolic shift, a clear message that the future of the royal family would no longer be dictated solely by tradition or duty. For once, family came first. The statement issued by the palace, while brief and devoid of the usual royal flourishes, carried with it a quiet power, a recognition that the monarchy was changing, evolving, and adapting to the new reality that had been thrust upon them. As the world reacted to this unprecedented move, Catherine and William's position as parents was now firmly established. They were no longer simply the future king and queen. They were a mother and father facing the hardest decision of their lives, and in that moment the world saw them not just as public figures, but as human beings struggling to protect their son from a fate that neither they nor anyone else could have predicted. The leak of Louis's medical condition, the subsequent fallout, and the final declaration from the palace marked the beginning of a new era for the royal family. It was an era defined by transparency, vulnerability, and the painful acceptance of a reality that could not be ignored. The monarchy had been forced to confront the fragility of its own existence, and in doing so had shown the world that even the most powerful families are not immune to the trials and tribulations of life. The future of the royal family, now more uncertain than ever, would no longer be shaped by the weight of tradition alone. It would be shaped by the choices they made as a family, by their willingness to adapt to a world that demanded authenticity over perfection, and by their unwavering commitment to protect the ones they loved. And as the world looked on, Catherine and William's decision to prioritize their son over the crown resonated deeply with people everywhere. It was a powerful reminder that, in the end, family comes first, and even the most established institutions must evolve to meet the demands of the human heart.